It's time for the Douglas Coleman Show. Mr. Smooth and Savvy is joined by guests from all walks of life, from the entertainment industry to authors to political and social commentators, the famous and not so famous, the controversial and the light and fluffy. We have it all. Now, here's Douglas Coleman.
Okay, please welcome back to the Douglas Coleman Show, Richard Sparks. Hi, Richard. How are you?
I'm very well, Douglas. How are you?
Doing fine, thank you. Thank you for coming back on the show. We looked it up, and you were on last in October of 23, so it's been well over a year, I guess. And
that's right. Well, that was the month before the first book in the series was published, and a couple of months ago, the second book, New Rock, New Realm. The first one was New Rock, New Roll, R-O-L-E, as you remember. Second one's just come out. The third one will be out in November. I've written 4, and I'm on the 5th at the moment, so I'm still ahead of publication.
I looked at the website, and these books look very Harry Potter-ish, are they?
Oh, well, I'll take the compliment. I mean, she's a wonderful writer. They're adventures with a lot of fun in them. They're not about school kids the same way. I mean, the central character is basically me, a sort of, retired English schoolmaster who whiles his time away playing role-playing games until he wins the world championship with his mates. And the next thing he knows, he's standing all alone on a hillside with beginner-level gear, and it's for real. He's his own avatar for real, not in a game. And he has to survive and figure out what happened if he's going to learn what happened and why, and a quest evolves, and then we're set up for the sequels.
Oh, so you're Graham Crowden.
Well, I'll no, I'm just I'm me until I'm a heroic young battle mage again. Of course, he enjoys being young, but he's a lot of problems to sort out, of course, and there's a lot of fun in there. One of the English critics was a bit worried because of my comedy writing background that I'd be sort of taking the mickey out of the genre and doing a spoof, but he said that's nothing like it at all. He called it fantasy, which a term I rather like. Fantasy adventures with quite a lot of comic elements that happen along the way.
Well, I know that you are a writer, and you were a TV writer, stage play writer, and you worked with Rowan Atkinson and I think John Cleese. And we talked about some of that in the first interview.
Mm-hmm. Rowan just turned 70 last week, and there was an article in The Guardian, which is one of the top English newspapers, about his 10 best film roles. And the one that came in number 1 was a sketch I wrote for him many years ago. So we're number 1 only 45 years later. Very, very nice to get that accolade. But he's done really well since then.
Are you good friends with him? I mean, do you hang out with him, or are you just work colleagues?
Well, I live in California, and he lives in. He's moved back to London now. So no, we don't. Well, we're good friends, but we don't sort of see each other very much because we're in different continents, and once you get married and settle down, your circle shrinks. But as far as I'm concerned, he's the same guy he was before actually he saw me on stage before I saw him, believe it or not. And I'm no kind of a comedy actor. I did a post-student show at the Edinburgh Festival, and he and that year's Oxford review came to support and were very polite about it. So my partner and I went to see him and his show a couple of days later, and I was absolutely blown away by him. He's brilliant. Was this before Mr. Bean? Oh, yeah, this was 10 years before, I would think. That was 1976. We did the show in Hampstead, for which I wrote The Schoolmaster in 77, in a little theatre, Hampstead Theatre, which John Cleese and Martin Lewis saw. No, wait a minute, 78. Martin and John came to see it, and then a year later, Rowan called me up and said, John Cleese just rang, and he wants me to be in his new charity show, and can I do the Schoolmaster? So I said, yes, of course you can. So that was 79, that film came out.
Oh, all right. Mr. Bean.
Yeah, long before Mr. Bean.
Mr. Bean was probably in the early 90s when that started?
Late 80s, I would think.
Yeah.
80s, 90s. Well, it's been quite a long running, all the films as well.
Yeah.
But he did a lot of comedy, physical comedy on stage beforehand, silent sketches, which were astonishing. And that was when he was a student. I drove the head of London Weekend Television, the head of the comedy department, Humphrey Barclay, down to Oxford to see him. And Humphrey saying, "Why am I going to go see a student show?" I said, "You'll see." And he couldn't wait to rush backstage and talk to Rowan afterwards.
Well, it's interesting that he was so good at silent physical comedy as well as talking, because if you recall or have read about when movies were silent back in the 100 and some odd years ago, that a lot of them had a terrible time transitioning, and Chaplin was probably one of the worst, where he was so brilliant as a silent physical comic, but he couldn't speak. And I thought his talking films were not good with him as a talking actor. He might have been better as a director. I think Buster Keaton was another one. And the only ones...
Keaton's amazing. Yeah, he's my favorite.
Harold Lloyd was another one that didn't, I don't think, transitioned well. The only ones that I think transitioned well from silent to talkies were Laurel and Hardy.
Yeah. Interesting factoid is that Stan Laurel and Charlie Chaplin emigrated to America on the same boat in the same voyage.
Oh.
So downstairs in steerage. That must have been a fun cabin.
Oh, yeah.
Must have been a lot of entertainment down there. No, they were great. The thing is, they all fell into this trap when speech came around of going from movies to talkies. And there were a lot of films that became very, very talk-heavy because it was the new exciting thing. But film scenarios, as they used to be called, are all acting. And when I got to Hollywood, I was just kind of surprised to learn that they say, well, we write the scenario first and then we add the dialogue. Coming from a background of playwriting and so on, the dialogue is the script. But it's not the case in film writing. The story structure is the script.
That's interesting. Speaking of writing, I wanted to ask you about opera, as I see that on here. And now I am no opera expert at all. I've seen a couple, and I enjoy the music and I enjoy the stage production. But honestly, the lyrics, most of them I think I saw were in Italian, so I didn't understand them anyways. But even if they were in English, I don't... How does one write lyrics for opera? Because it seems like, I'm a pop songwriter. I've written many, many pop songs, and there's a rhythmic sort of way that you do it. But for me, opera just seems like it just could ramble. Stuff doesn't need to rhyme necessarily, does it?
No, there's no fixed rule, but it's similar to writing musicals, which I've done lyrics and books for those. You work with the composer, and old-fashioned composers in the old days, if you look at a lot of operas, the weakest part of them is the book, the libretto. Quite often they're not very good compared with the brilliance of the writing. If you look at, let's say, the Mozart one, what's the Magic Flute, excuse me. I did a children's version of it called The Magic Dream for the LA Opera. That's utterly silly, and it would have completely disappeared if it hadn't been for the brilliance of Mozart's music. Now, that's a weak spot in opera, but nowadays, modern opera lyricists and librettists, we're as good as modern playwrights and modern book writers for Broadway. We have to be, because it wouldn't be tolerated by either the director or the audience or the composer. You have to come up to that standard, which the old days, a lot of those, as you say, those lyrics and those arias don't really seem to have lasted the test of time particularly well.
Well, I guess what I need to do then is to watch an opera, not live, but on YouTube or something, and put the subtitles up so that as they're singing, I can sort of follow the actual lyrics, because I can't understand any of it. I just listen to the music.
Well, yeah. No, it's right. Those super titles are a fantastic invention. And so, especially if it's in a foreign language when they're translated. The last one I did was Hansel and Gretel. That's a revival. It was done in Dallas. A wonderful production by Doug Fitch, the director. And that's just incredibly beautiful music. And what I was asked to do was write a new English libretto, so I was able to fix the holes in the German. Because, the librettist, Adelheid Vetter, was not a particularly skilled or experienced writer, and so there were things that you wouldn't normally, and there were people telling each other things they already knew. That's a no-no in script writing, so I was able to rewrite those when I translated them into English. But what I should do is I should send you Dulce Rosa, the CD of that, and that was one done at the LA Opera main stage production, conducted by Placido Domingo, and it was based on a short story by Isabel Allende. And you'll see in that, there are interviews with Isabel and Placido afterwards on the CD, but you'll see that her short story had one line of dialogue in it, in 10 pages. And my libretto is all dialogue, which the composer Lee Holdridge set to music. And luckily, Isabel was very, very pleased with the result, which was important to me. But that was a fun job. So, yes, let me have your address and we'll get you a CD.
Okay, yeah, I'd be interested to see that. I also see Dom DeLuise's name on here. I did not know that he was an opera singer.
No, he did a song in a not very successful film called The Secret of Nim 2. It was obviously sequel to The Secret of Nim, an animated film. Lee Holdridge and I were asked to write 5 songs for it, and Dom DeLuise was one of them. One of the singers in it. Another one of the singers in it was Eric Idle, who played the Bad Mouse. He was wonderful. He played Martin the Bad Mouse, and one of his great songs, it's on YouTube, is Just Say Yes. It's my anti-Nancy Reagan Just Say No song. So he's tempting his innocent little brother to join the dark side. And Eric was smashing. He did a great job in it.
So Eric and Dom DeLuise worked together? That sounds interesting.
Well, they kind of. I mean, they were in different rooms at different times, but doing songs in the show. I think it was. I'm pretty certain. Yeah, that was it. Yeah. Eric was great because he was a hero of mine. Obviously, all the Pythons were since their radio days in England.
Do you know Jim Pittick?
No. Why does that ring a bell?
Well, he's a British actor, and he is probably best mates with Eric Idle. He's been in the films, the 2 Christopher Guest films he was in.
Oh, yeah. What do you mean, A Mighty Wind and all those?
A Mighty Wind and Best in Show. Yeah, he was in both of those.
A Mighty Wind was designed by, the costumes were designed by Dorinda Wood, who did the costumes for Dulce Rosa at the LA Opera. And she also designed the Borg in Star Trek, so she's quite a claim to fame.
Well, I know that, it's a small world and everybody is connected in the entertainment industry somehow. So when you hear a name...
Through Kevin Bacon, of course.
Yeah. So when you hear a name, when you said Eric Idle, then, that immediately made me think of Jim, who's been on the show, and he was promoting his book and told me some wonderful stories about working in a porn shop in London in the late 60s and all sorts of...
how do you spell that? Is that P-A-W-N or the other spelling? Because we pronounced it differently.
For Jim?
I mean, well, P-A-W-N is a pawn shop, as Americans would say it, where you go and...
Oh, no, pawn. No, not pawn. Porn. As in pornography.
Oh, yeah, well, that's spelling, eh? Well, those must have been fun stories.
As in pornographic, yeah.
Wow.
He worked in one of those sort of places for a while. And he had the auspicious job of mopping the floor.
Oh, my God.
Yeah.
Oh, God. Oh, dear. Well, I haven't got that on my resume.
It was a funny interview. If you get a chance, it's on my YouTube, on my channel.
Oh, I'll have to listen to that. Yeah.
He was promoting his book, which I can't remember, but it had something to do with his pants down, and it's quite funny. And I think Eric Idle is well into the book. I think Eric did the foreword of the book.
Oh, wow! Well, I have to check that one out too.
But the interview is good. It's pretty funny. Okay, let me circle back to your book. So you did all of this writing with TV and stage plays, opera, and now you're writing. What genre would this be in? These books, the new
A
rock,
fantasy adventures with a lot
Okay.
of comedy in them. Yes, the idea just fell out of the sky and hit me on the head one day. And I've always wanted to write narrative because I think it's the highest form of writing, with the possible exception of epic poetry, which nobody writes these days. Because you're telling the story as well as showing it. You're bringing scenes to life. It's just you and the reader. You know, much though I've loved working with people like Rowan and Eric and so on. That's teamwork, and it's great. It's lovely when a wonderful actor does good stuff with your words, and you're working with good directors and designers and script editors, all of that. But a book is just you and the reader, or you and the listener in the audiobooks, because I do those as well for my books, and it's a very different relationship, much more intimate, and it's much purer in some ways. Of course, huge props must go to my editor, Leslie Robin, who's very well known in the fantasy world. She's absolutely brilliant, and she really helped me mine the material that I'd written. She kept saying, more of this. This is really good. That relationship's great. I want more of it. Instead of, a lot of editors just concentrate on the bits that need to be cut, which of course we do. But so it is teamwork to that extent. But otherwise, it's just you and the reader, and it's wonderful to be storytelling.
Was it a difficult transition in the sense of your mindset, having to kind of format? I mean, I suppose you went the other way around, because I know a lot of authors who wrote novels for years and didn't sell a book, and when they converted one of them to a screenplay, all of a sudden it got picked up. But you're going from the economy of words to maximum amount of words in a novel. But you're kind of went the other way, right?
Unleashing the floodgates. No, it wasn't difficult at all. I've always wanted to do it, but I've always known how to write, but I didn't know what to write. I didn't have the idea that it was just me and me alone, and that I've written unpublished works before over the years, as I've sort of part of the learning process. I'm glad none of them were published because they weren't good enough. But this was just, when I had this idea, I suddenly thought, wow, at last. In fact, I was talking to John Lloyd, who created Not the 9 O'Clock News and Blackadder and QI and Spitting Image the other day, and he said, left it a bit late, haven't you? Because we go back to the old days together. He was actually Douglas Adams' writing partner, on Hitchhiker, on the radio series.
Oh, okay.
So we all go back to the to the old days. Yeah, I mean, it's just, I'm delighted to have found it at last. It's my bliss.
Well, you said that 2 are out, and how many more are coming?
Well, I've written 2 more. Leslie, the editor, is working on the developmental edit of the 3rd book. The 4th book is on the runway, waiting for her undivided attention. That'll come out in 2026. The 3rd book, New Rock, New Rules, comes out on Halloween this year. I think we're going to launch it at the World Fantasy Convention in Brighton, England, which is the Halloween weekend. So, and I'm working on book 5 at the moment, and I'm taking a bit of a detour because some short stories seem to be cropping up with some of the peripheral characters seem to be having a lot of adventures on the side, which is kind of a fun break in a way. So if I get enough of those, there may be a volume of short stories popping up as well.
Are you going to be shopping this around to have it made into film or a Netflix series or something?
Well, that's already been done. The producers bought the rights, and I've written the screenplay for him. I thought it would be, television, because that's the way everything's going these days. But he said that the streaming world has changed a lot, and people don't really want long, endless streaming series quite as much as they used to. He said what people really want is just a good 2-hour adventure. So I turned a 450-page book into a 120-page screenplay. And he's sitting on it, and if anything happens to it, I'm sure he'll let me know.
Well, I think on that, we're going to wind this down. Thank you so much for coming back. It's always a pleasure speaking with you. I always learn something from you. So I'm very happy about that.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me, Douglas. I actually always enjoy talking about writing and the process, especially when I go to fantasy conventions and on panels, and people want to learn about things like, well, how to be edited, what's it like working with an editor, simple things like that. And having been both sides of the desk as a script editor, I can tell you, well, that's where the magic really happens. That's when you get good. So I love talking about this. It's been my life's passion, writing.
Last question before we wrap it up. Do you have a website you want to give out?
Yes, Richard. If you go to richardsparks.com, SPARKS, no E in Sparks, you can get a free chapter of New Rockney Roll, the first book, ROLE, and the free chapter of New Rockney Realm, the second book. Also, you can get 2 free audio chapters, 2 different audio chapters. So there are 4 chapters available for free on the website, so people can get a taste of it, and if it appeals, they can dive on in and join in the fun.
Wasn't there a strange sort of German new wave band back in the 80s called Sparks?
Yeah, they were actually American. They
were American?
Huge in France.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
Russell Mael, Ron and Russell Mael, I think. And he had a Hitler moustache.
One of them looked like Hitler. German. That's what I remember.
Yeah. They were massive in France.
Yeah.
They were sort of okay in England. They were known a bit. But,
well, there's a flashback.
They didn't give me any kind of royalty on the name, I'm sad to say.
Oh, that's too bad. Okay. Well, thank you so much again for coming on the show. And, you're welcome to come back when the third one releases. I'm sure we'll find something else to talk about.
I'd love to. Thank you very much.